Hey guys, welcome back to Empire Prints. I am doing a voiceover for this first section of the video. Not like I normally do because I was originally going to do Commander Stone, but decided to do Commander Pons. I like him way more as a character, and I've been wanting to do his helmet for a while. So I decided to switch it up last second. I did have some layer shifts when I switched the filament because I actually ran out when printing this. And I printed it in two parts on a Bamboo Lab P1S. And when taking off the supports, I have some scratches throughout the helmet, but we'll fix that in post-processing, so let's get to it. For the first step of my process, I'm just taking my soldering iron and I'm welding the parts together. This is a pretty simple process. Just make sure you tape the pieces together and get them as aligned as you can, because if they aren't aligned, you're going to have a lot of filler issues and it's just going to be way more post-processing. But luckily, this is a Galactic Armory file, so there's actually a groove which the dome connects to on the top of the helmet, so pretty much self-aligns for you, which is really nice. So I always like to start my sanding process to get ready for primers and fillers by using a 220 grit pad on a mouse sander. This stuff makes quick work to these layer lines. You're gonna get the majority of them out. It's only gonna leave those deeper imperfections like layer shifts or any seam lines you might have. Or if your printer comes out with maybe a harder quality print, or you had some more issues when you were printing, you can always come in with an 80 grit sandpaper pad and then the 220, and that can really help. So if you have any rougher spots, always go in with the 80 and then the 220, and it will do the exact same thing I'm doing here. It's just a little bit more steps, but the amount of time you put into this sanding is the quality you're going to get out of it. Moving on to our first filler process, I like to do this before I put any filler primer on. It just really fills in any layer lines I might have missed when mouse sanding, or any slight imperfections that are just going to save us a lot of filler primer. And make sure you're wearing proper PPE. You want to wear gloves and a mask for this stuff. You don't want it on your hands, and you don't want to be smelling it. It does not smell good. So just make sure to wear all that, and then you want to wipe it over the whole helmet. Try to avoid any drips if possible. It's just going to make sanding a little bit easier. But if not, we're going to pretty rough sand this after this process. Now, before we go into sanding this helmet, I just want to come in with some straight Bondo, and I want to go over that entire seam line between the dome and the base of the helmet. Just make sure you're really pushing it down into that seam line. We want to fill it so it looks like one uniform piece. And then I want to go over the top of the fin, and then I want to go over those layer shifts that I had. Probably won't have those if you print this yourself. I ran out of filament because I miscalculated how much I had in my roll. So it kind of sat out and had some layer shifts, but that's not too big of a deal. We'll just fill it in with some Bondo and smooth it down with the rest of the helmet. After our Bondo is dried, we can come in with a 400 grit wet sand over the whole helmet. And we want to do a pretty rough sand, but not so much as we're burning through the entirety of the Bondo acetone. This stuff is very thin. It's very good at filling in, but you can sand right back down to the layer lines. So just be careful when you're sanding, and then we can go into our first layer of filler primer, which at this point we should have a pretty good base layer for that filler primer. After a couple rounds of filler primer, I think I did about 2, we can go straight into the final wet sand before we put on our white base coat for the helmet. And this is a very rinse and repeat process. The amount of time and effort you put into it is the quality you're going to get out of a helmet. I normally get this helmet if I start in the morning. I can normally get this helmet done in a day. I normally let the filler primer sit for about 2 hours before I wet sand it, which is normally pretty good. I mean, it does clog up my sandpaper, but I'm able to get it sanded. I just have to use a little bit more sandpaper. But this process is very efficient and fast for me. I can get helmets out pretty quick, which is awesome. And any other issues you might have, just fill in with some Bondo. Those deeper imperfections are guaranteed on a print. You're going to have them regardless, especially on domes, depending on how you print. But now we can go into our white base coat. For the white paint, I just use some Rust-Oleum Ultra Matte White. I use this on all my clone helmets. It's a fantastic white, but I normally do about 2 to 3 coats, because if you don't, the white is almost transparent and it looks kind of spotty and rough. So just make sure to get a nice heavy even coat throughout the whole helmet. And then we can move on to taping. I'm just using some frog tape. I never have any issues with frog tape with leaking. This stuff is a nice, good seal. And he has a pretty simple paint scheme, Pons. I just drew out the loops in the front so I could get them nice and round and even. And then we just taped up the front for the most part. And then we're ready to move on to painting. So I normally don't do this with my helmets because I just think there's less control and less finer types of scratches. But I decided to use some liquid latex, which would be a big problem later. We will get to that later in the video. This was a bad idea. I wish I would not have done this. I don't know if I, didn't properly put it on or I put too much on. I think I put too much on, but I also put it to the point where it looked too uniform. It didn't look like random scratches, or I didn't do fine enough scratches, because liquid latex is amazing, but I don't know what went wrong here. It was super clear, so I almost couldn't tell where I already put it. So that was probably another issue on its own, but I failed miserably here. I'm going to try it on another helmet just so I can show you guys a different process that's not my X-Acto blade scratching, but this did not work on this helmet, and you'll see later in the next couple clips. Once our liquid latex has dried, I just use some basic Artist Loft red and some Folk Art matte black, kind of mix these together, and then use some airbrush flow improver. This stuff is amazing if you're using any thicker paints in an airbrush. You're not going to have any issues with like clogging or it not spraying out right. And Pond's color is very mixed. Sometimes I see a maroon, sometimes I see a brown, sometimes I see a red. They're kind of all over the place. I preferred a dark maroon color. That's just the color I wanted on display for my helmet. And I just sprayed this over the whole helmet, did several layers, and then we can move on to demasking and taking off the liquid latex. Once the dark red paint has dried, we can move into demasking the entire helmet. Just make sure you're pulling off the tape nice, slow, and evenly. We don't want to accidentally tear up the white paint and reveal a primer layer below. And then once we've removed all the tape, we can go into removing the liquid latex, which this just starts to reveal how awful I hated this helmet. But you just want to reveal it. I just use my finger to remove the liquid masking tape. It's pretty simple. And then I tried to fix the imperfections with an X-Acto blade and sandpaper, and as you'll see in the next clip, it did not work out. Alright guys, so we're probably about halfway through the video right now, and here is the Pond's helmet so far. Paint job came out really clean. I actually started to add the Arbesh in the back. Some guys have all the luck is what he has on the back of his helmet, but as you can see, there's a lot of scratches, and that was not my intention. This is why I don't like liquid latex. I use liquid latex, and I always end up getting too many spots, or I either overdo it, or they look too almost toyish, like it's a printed scratch that you see on Hasbro helmets, and I absolutely dislike it. And when I started pulling the tape off, we had issues up here, and then all down here, it ripped up the white. And normally I can get past some of this in weathering, but this is just like a lot. I don't know if it just didn't stick to the primer right. Down here, it's all right. And right here, pulled off a big chunk. So I'm gonna resand the whole thing. I'm just gonna sand it down with 400 grit wet sand, and then we're gonna hit it with a coat of white so we can redo, because I was not looking to have this many scratches. It also doesn't look neat. I normally go for a weathered look, but this is very disorganized. I tried to fix it with sandpaper and miniature scratches, and it just did not turn out how I wanted it to. So we're gonna wet sand this down, hit it with a coat of white, and then we'll be back. After resanding it and respraying it white and then retaping it, I finally doing the exact same thing with the color, just that dark maroon look. And I'm just using my airbrush with some airbrush flow improver, because this stuff came out great. And we ended up getting this nice, neat paint job. I actually think it turned out a lot better than the first time around. I just think it laid a lot nicer, more vibrant of a color. And now we can restart the process by painting all the details, such as the brim line around the entirety of the helmet. And unlike most clone helmets, Commander Pond's, that strip of gray that normally runs around the back of the helmet, is actually red. So we just left that red. I just made sure to tape around it because I really did not want any leakage. And then we just paint up the rest of the details, such as the frown and that black piece in the back of the helmet. And then we can start moving towards weathering. Once I'd finished painting all the details, I can finally begin our weathering process. And here, like any other helmets I do, I'm just taking an X-Acto blade and I'm very roughly doing scratches throughout the entirety of the paint job. They're very random, disorganized, they're different sizes and shapes. Just don't go too overboard because you definitely can go overboard, but like most of my helmets, I like to tell a story and show that they've been battle worn and they've been beaten and been thrown around. These guys were all over the place in the Clone Wars. So I like to show that, so I do pretty heavily weathering. It just depends on the character I'm doing. And as you can tell, compared to the previous clip, I'm much happier with this battle worn damage and how the paint chips look. And here's the Arabesh on the back. I did repeat that. It is so cool. Not a lot of clone helmets have that, so I'm really happy I got to add that extra detail to this helmet. My next step in the weathering process is to give everything a weather wash, which is just some cheap black and brown acrylic paints. And I'm just wiping this over the entirety of the helmet, making sure to dab off the wash that I do and not streak it, because if you just wipe it off, it's going to leave streaks and it's going to look very unrealistic. So just make sure dabbing it off, and you can go as heavy as you want or as little as you want. The more paint you add, the heavier the wash is going to look. Once we have finished with the weather wash, I like to dirty up all the crevices and add scratches and scorch marks throughout the entirety of the helmet. So I just take some oil pastel chalks and some Mod Podge, and then I dilute it down with some water, and this gives you a very chalky, textured, like kind of a grainy dirt that you can put in all the crevices. It has a texture, and you can see like the little chalk chunks. So if you're doing rust around the ears, you can do that as well. And I just like to rub this in with my finger. I think it works really well to get that really in-depth dirt within the crevices, and I just think it looks so good, especially when I do scratches. It provides this nice scorch mark look, almost like a burnt. It looks really, really cool. So pastel chalks are the way to go when I weather my helmets. They're just so efficient, and they provide a really good sense of realism. I'm just using a Hobart face shield and some chicken mesh for the frown, and this helmet is all ready to be shown off. If you've made it this far in the video, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support I get from you guys, and I look forward to making more projects like this. If you really enjoyed the video, I really appreciate you subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.